Now tonight I'm going to be giving you, I'm going to be reading to you from something that I'm really not supposed to have here. And I think it's going to make some members of the Brotherhood extremely angry that I do have it, and that I'm going to read to you from it. The only problem in my mind is, where in the world do I start? This will, of course, illuminate you and bring you the true meaning of the lost word, the lost light, the secrets hidden behind the veil. Some of you may not have the slightest idea of what I am speaking. Others of you who have been listening to this broadcast for quite some time know that this is the ancient secret doctrine of the mysteries. Now, I find it quite remarkable that the actual doctrine of the ancient pagan religions and the mystery schools is quite different from the propagandized and, again, deceptive teachings that are given to the initiates of the secret fraternities, the Illuminati, today. In fact, it has once again been twisted and turned in order to deviate people from truth, or from ever knowing the truth about what people thought was true, and what may be true, and what may not be true, to something that promotes, again, a political agenda. The political agenda is socialism. It is communism. It is trying to take us back the way that the world should never go. And the end result, of course, would be total control and manipulation of every single human being on the face of this earth, from birth to grave, every single moment of their lives. But you see, even though the ancient pagan religions and the ancient mystery teachings may not be true, there is always the possibility that some of those teachings may be true. And there is also the possibility that most of the modern great religions and churches may be just perversions of that ancient mystery religion. In fact, I can guarantee you that many of them absolutely are, and it can be proven without a doubt for those who wish to study the subject. Religion, from the very beginning of man, has been a method for a few to control many. Now, I'm not telling you that you should or should not believe in any religion. If you know me, folks, you know that I believe in freedom. I believe in freedom of choice. I believe in freedom to worship whatever you want to worship, even if it's a rock on the side of the road. I don't care, as long as you don't hurt the person or property of any other human being. I would hope that along the way you would hear me or someone else who is imparting truth or trying to impart truth, because truth is sometimes elusive at best. And sometimes, even when we believe that we have the truth, sometimes we again have been misled. We've all been through that many times. And me probably more than most, because I have been on a quest for the truth for so many years that I don't even remember when I started, ladies and gentlemen. And it is amazing where that quest will take you. Most of you have been busy, embroiled in everyday life, embroiled in entertainment, in satisfying your senses, in falling in love and procreating and making a family and getting a job and making sure that you have enough money to feed that family and house that family. And you've been taught by many different people, starting with your parents, that's all that life is really all about, and that you really weren't capable of doing much more than that anyway. And somehow you believed it along the way, and so you got stuck in that. And so you may not have have been searching as long or as hard as I have, you may not have been down some of the alleys and dead-end streets and almost fallen off of some of the cliffs that I have almost fallen off of, and on occasion actually fallen off of, only to always come back to the straight and narrow path. And so it would behoove you to listen with an open mind and try to learn something from this. For I'm not trying to tell you that what you're going to hear is right. On the contrary, I'm going to try to tell you that this is what it is, and many people believe it, or a perversion of it. And it is what guides them in their agendas. It is their religion. Whether or not they will admit it publicly, it is their religion. And that can also be documented in their own words. So, I think I'm going to start in the middle of this. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And that's a deviation from normally what I do. But as I said, folks, I'm not supposed to have this. And this is not something that is let out of the clutches of the Brotherhood too often or willingly. And so I must be very careful with how I handle this and how I impart it, and how much about its true nature and its source and origin as I can possibly be. And so I will. So I'm not going to ask you to trust me that this is true. You know my admonition. Listen to everyone, read everything, believe absolutely nothing or anyone unless you can prove it in your own research. That is an absolute necessity in this age of deception. And look, folks, it is, without any doubt, the greatest age of deception that has ever existed on the face of this earth. Because I can tell you, quite frankly, that from the very beginning, when one man learned that he could control other men by deceiving them, deception has been rampant in this world. And if you ever thought that you lived in a world where everybody around you was honest and telling you the truth, and these people that you have in government are always telling you the truth, then you haven't grown up yet. You're still living as a child. And that's got to change very quickly. If you want to survive this great battle that is raging, ladies and gentlemen, and a great battle is raging. It's a war, as a matter of fact. And it is a quiet war, which mostly uses silent weapons, but nevertheless, it is a war. And there are casualties. And there is violence in this war. And people are destroyed. Whole families and populations are destroyed. And so, without further ado, we will get into the meat of the matter after this short intermission, which will sort of lay a little groundwork here.
Why am I changing? Why do people get complacent with the things they're told? World disasters, they come and go. I give anything just to be back home. 'Cause there are people asking why. There are people who believe in life. It's confusing, but I don't know why. But I've made my plans already. How do I get to where I've come from now? How will I face this God that I've destroyed? Can I get back to where
Now, ladies and gentlemen, during this narrative, remember that I am reading from an esoteric revelatory book that it can only be found in the hidden libraries of the fraternal orders around the world, the secret societies which at the very top hide the full body of adepts known as the Illuminati. So pay very close attention, and you're going to learn an awful lot about what makes them tick over the next few broadcasts, and why they do and believe some of the things that they do and believe, and why they hate you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, if you want to talk about hate crimes, these people are up to their ears in hate crimes. I begin. Little could the ancient mythologists and sages have foreseen that the fabulous narrations which their genius devised to cloak high truth would end by plaguing the mind of the Western world with 16 centuries of unconscionable stultification. They could not possibly imagine that their allegorical constructions to dramatize spiritual truth would so miscarry from their hidden intent as to cast the mental life of half the world for ages under the cloud of the most grotesque superstition known to history. Nor could they have dreamed that the gross blindness and obtuseness of later epochs would cite these same marvelously ingenious portrayals as the evidence of childish crudity on the part of their formulators. Who could have suspected that a body of the most signal instrumentalities for conveying and preserving deep knowledge ever devised by man would become the means of centuries of mental enslavement? Nothing more clearly evidences the present age's loss of fixed moorings in philosophical truth than the inconsistency of its attitudes toward the sacred scriptures of antiquity. The general mind, indoctrinated by priestcraft, regards them as infallible revelations and holds them as fetishes, which it were a sacrilege to challenge, while theological scholarship hedges from pious veneration of them over to outright skepticism of their divine origin, swinging more recently to a view which takes them to be the simple conceptions of men just emerging from cave and forest barbarism. The character of divine dictation and absolute wisdom assigned to them on the one thesis has yielded to that of ignorant speculation of primitive folk on the other. That there is a possible truer characterization of them lying midway between the extravagances of these two extreme views has not seemed to come through to intelligence at any time. It has not occurred to students of religion that ancient scripts are the work neither of supreme deity on the one side, nor of groping infantile humanity on the other, but that their production must be sought in a region intermediate between the two. They came neither from supernal deity nor from common humanity, but from humanity divinized. They were the output of normal humans, graduated to divine or near divine status. St. Paul's, quote, just men made perfect, end quote. Their divinity is therefore not transcendent and exotic, and their humanity is not crude and doltish. They bear the marks, therefore, of human sagacity exalted to divine mastership. When a student graduates creditably from a college, he is presumed to have acquired a mastery over the field of knowledge covered in his course. Human life is a school, and why should not its graduates be presumed to have gained mastery over the range of knowledge which it covers, and to be able to write authoritatively upon it? Humans must at some time attain the goal, the prize of the high calling of God in Christly illumination, the crown of glorious intelligence. Life's school issues no diploma of graduation without attainment, for the graduation is the attainment. We have here the ground for the only sane acceptance of the ancient scriptures as books of accredited wisdom. We are neither asked to believe them inscribed by the finger of omnipotent deity, nor forced to attribute them to the undeveloped brains of primitives. They can be seen as the products of the sage wisdom garnered by generations of men who had finally risen to clear understanding. They are the literary heritage bequeathed by men grown to the stature of divinity. Their veneration by the world for long centuries, even carried to the extreme of outrageous sycophancy, attests an indestructible tradition of their origination from sources accredited as divine and infallible. Their successful hold on the popular mind for many ages bespeaks also the unshakable foundations of their wisdom. They have withstood consistently the test of generations of human experience. Their wisdom holds against life. It reigns true, and it is all the more precious to us because of its authorship by men of our own evolution, since thereby it does not miss immediate pertinence to our life. Both the conventional views of Bible authorship have militated against the possible high service of the Scriptures to mankind. The theory of their divine dictation to holy men of old has led to the abject surrender of the rational mind before their impregnable fortress of direct assertion, its hypnotization by a fetish, and the crippling of its native energies. The theory of their production by early crudity tends to the disparagement of the value and validity of their message. The other view here advanced preserves their venerated authority while it brings their authorship from alleged cosmic divinity back to men of earth. It saves us from the fatuous claim that God took time out to dictate a volume of absolute verity for the inhabitants of a minor planet amongst millions of trillions of such worlds. Relieving us of the necessity of asserting that supreme deity went into the book publishing business on this globe and took advantage of his commanding position to write the planet's bestseller, it preserves mental integrity by enabling us to assign scriptural authorship to human agency, where it alone is acceptable. It is understandable that evolved men with vision opened to knowledge of the laws of life would indite sage tomes for the enlightenment of those less advanced. In any case, the Bibles are here. They must be accounted for. The phenomenon of their existence among the nations, their hoary age, their escape from destruction through the centuries, the ineradicable tradition of their divine origin and authority, their almost universal veneration, must all find some factual ground of explanation. The theory offered in refutation of the two conventional ones seems the only one that provides such a rational and acceptable basis. And since the belief in their sacredness generally persists, it cannot be regarded as less than momentous that the world should know of a surety that, while these revered relics are not the voice of the personified cosmos, neither are they the mere speculative romancing of cavemen or scholastics. They are the sure word of perfected wisdom. There was a time, then, in early human history, when enlightened men possessed true knowledge, the passport to wisdom. Clear and concise answers to the profoundest problems of philosophy were known. Insofar as the human intellectual faculty is capable of it, an understanding of the mystery and riddle of life itself and the laws of its evolutionary unfolding was achieved by men who, as Hermes says, had been, quote, reborn in mind, end quote. Philosophy was no more, quote, speculative enterprise, end quote, or tilting at logical windmills. It was a statement of the fundamental archai, or basic principles of the science of being. It formed the groundwork for the elevation of theology to its true place as the king of sciences, or the kingly science. Together, philosophy and theology held the throne in the mental life of mankind, and justly so, for a reason which modern thought would do well to consider. They must ever be the ultimate science because they motivate finally the use we make of all other sciences. They hold final answers to all life's problems. They are the determiners of all human action in the end. They alone can direct man finally to the path of good, or by no other means can he learn to know what constitutes the good. The sore need of the world today is the restoration of philosophy to supply the proper motivation and end of action. Though zealously guarded from the unworthy by its accredited custodians, knowledge was extant in the ancient day. Modern zeal for publicity finds it hard to understand why it was so sedulously kept esoteric. Briefly, for the full reason is a lengthy matter, a thing so precious, the distillation of ages of experience and the deposit of many lives of painful earning, could not be given out loosely to the undisciplined rabble to be violated and despoiled. Yet it was withheld from no worthy aspirant. No bars of bigotry or persecution interdicted its free culture. The societies in which it was secretly pursued were honored by kings and the populace alike. That halcyon age passed. That priceless legacy of knowledge was threatened with extinction. Its pursuit was forbidden. Its devotees assailed and exterminated. And for more than 15 centuries, the Occidental world has muddled through its age-to-age existence in nearly total ignorance of the fact that antiquity held in its philosophy and theology an adequate answer to the great interrogatory, the Sphinx riddle of human life. And as an aside here, folks, I have discussed the riddle of the Sphinx on past broadcasts, and I have told you the truth about what the Sphinx represents. And those of you who are quick and understood the symbology will make that connection again here. I continue. The gift and then the loss of primal wisdom are the two most momentous events in human history. This age will be spectator to the third most significant event, the renaissance of ancient culture. The plans of demigods and divine men, interrupted for 15 centuries of the Dark Ages, will move forward again toward destined goals, the completion of the great work. This age faces the denouement of a drama the like of which has not been unrolled in world history before and will hardly be repeated in aeons. Tragedy and comedy being copiously admixed in mortal existence, the astounding spectacle to which the world will shortly awake will exhibit untold calamity and the ludicrous conjoined in incredible fashion. We are destined soon to pass from a stunning sense of tragic loss to a world-echoing burst of laughter. The sting of our realization of our duo-millennial loss will melt away under the dawning recognition of our previous unbelievable stupidity. We are in a little time to be made acutely aware of a situation that will become the butt of hollow mirth for ages to come. Other egregious follies of history can be accepted or extenuated to the point of being condoned and forgotten. But this colossal ineptitude, prolonged over 16 centuries, cannot escape being laughed at for centuries more. A joke owes its character to the miscarriage of the intended sense into something ludicrously different. This denouement will stand as the historical joke of the ages. No less then this quantity of hilarity can balance the weight of the tragedy which loads the joke at the other end. For the ludicrously different direction in which the intended sense of the great mythical religions and dramatic rituals of the past took its perverted course entailed as a consequence the greatest of all historical fed out of the miscarriage of the concealed meaning of the ancient spiritual myth. The transaction carried the form of a joke, but it also carried the substance of the most appalling terrorism in history. And this most calamitous of all blunders was the mistaking of religious myth, drama, and allegory for veridical history. The promise of our coming awakening. The promise of our coming awakening lies in the progress made and to be made in the study of comparative religion, comparative mythology, and comparative philology. What they will ere long make clear to us beyond further dispute is the most unthinkable fact that for 16 centuries the best intelligence of the West took the ancient sages' books of wisdom, which were in all cases the spiritual dramatizations of the experience of the human soul on earth, for objective historical narratives. The spectacle that will soon throw a world first into wonder, confusion, and dismay, and then into clownish laughter, is that of a civilization covering 1/3 of the globe, and boasting itself as the highest in culture in the historical period, all the while taking its moral and spiritual guidance for an aeon from a book or books of the true content and meaning of which it never for one moment has had the slightest inkling.
There used to be a great tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's high enough to kill. But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become alive and the light that you shine can't be seen? I can bring you to a kiss from a rose on the tree. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. And now that your rose is in bloom, I like it the bloom on the grave. To me, I like a grown-up fiction that I can't deny. Now won't you tell me is that happy baby? But did you know that when it snows, my eyes become a large and the light that you shine can't be seen.
You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper, and I'm reading to you from a jealously guarded, esoteric tome that comes right out of the heart of the mysteries. This is, ladies and gentlemen, what you're hearing and what you will hear over the next several broadcasts, the heart and soul of the truth of the mystery religions that gave birth to socialism, communism, humanism, and is at war, totally and completely at war with all the other religions of the earth. Their goal is to completely destroy all existing nation states, all existing churches and religions, and to shackle the mob in a system of world totalitarian socialist government. And so you had better listen to this. The superior knowledge vouchsafed from early graduates in life school to disciplined pupils in the mysteries of old was transmitted from generation to generation by oral teaching and preserved only in memory. But later, lest it be lost or corrupted, it was consigned to writing. Hence came the sacred books of Scriptures, Holy Writ of antiquity. So highly were they held in the esteem of early men that when in later days their true origin and character had been forgotten, they were exalted to the position of veritable fetishes and assigned a quite preternatural source and rating. Regarded as books of superhuman intelligence, men have in face of them practically set in abeyance their human reason and bowed to them as the oracles of absolute truth. This was natural and to a degree inevitable, but it spelled catastrophe to the general mental life of man by fixing upon him the basest hypnotization in all the annals of record, when a literal and historical instead of a purely spiritual and typical interpretation of the books was broadcast to general acceptance. The evidence is mountain high that the taking of ancient ritual dramas and scriptural myths for objective history and the figures in them for human persons has been the fountain source of the most abject corruption of man's mental forces since the race began. In mechanical exploit, this is an age of marvel, and credit for this type of achievement should not be withheld. In study of life and its objective powers, it has labored with wondrous accomplishment. In psychological delving into deeper phases of consciousness, it has begun a pursuit long neglected. But in religion and philosophy, it is one of the blindest of ages. It is not overstating the case to say that in these areas of human enterprise, the mind of this era still slumbers in a state of ineptitude and gross darkness, at least a degree or two below that commonly termed barbaric. At this moment, the common mentality of the day, led and fed by a compactly institutionalized ecclesiastical power, stands committed to ideas as to the origin, structure, meaning, and destiny of life, which have not been surpassed in crudity and chimerical absurdity by the tribes of the forest and the sea isles. Conceptions in theology, having to do with basic realities of man's relation to the universe, are still presented in pulpits, Sunday schools, and theological seminaries, which the uncorrupted native intelligence of children of 8 and 10 years shrinks from or accepts with startled dismay, to the subsequent confusion of their whole mental integrity. A scheme of explanation of cosmic processes and world design, of human and angelic relations, of the plan and purport of life itself, is advanced for popular acceptance, yet it is grotesque to common sense and fantastic to rational thought. Philosophy and religion are still propagated on the basis of a theology that is received without understanding by the common people, entirely repudiated by the intelligentsia, and brazenly dissembled by the very priesthood that lips its cantos and its oracles from Sunday to Sunday. In sum, it can be said without the remotest possibility of successful dispute that the general grasp of the mind of this age on philosophical verity and the truth of life, as proffered by orthodox religionism, is still steeped in the crassest forms of dark superstition, and this has been due to the miscarriage of ancient symbolism. History would seem to present a pattern of retrogressive current if it can be shown that this late epoch grovels in a mire of semi-barbaric philosophical grossness from which a former period was free. Degeneracy must have set in at some distant time and swept onward to this day, and such a phenomenon must have had its due cause. A great work of a learned author some years ago pointed to the approaching, quote, decline of the West, end quote. What has not been seen, however, is that the West has long been in decline, is at a low stage of decay, and has not risen out of the murks of the Dark Ages. This has come in the wake of causes long operative in the world situation, which have been overlooked or failed of discovery through an egregious obscuration of the vision of scholars since the early centuries. And if this failure of insight is not to be attributed to stupidity that is in itself beyond understanding, then it becomes necessary for the historian of these things to posit for it another cause, one that casts the dark shadow of sinister motive over the whole course of that historical enterprise in which sinister motive is of all places most unpardonable. Corruption in politics or in economic or social life can be understood in relation to the imperfection of human nature and in a measure pardoned. But designed corruption in religion is shattering to the very foundations of human aspiration. It shocks and paralyzes fundamental urges to sincerity. It weights the human spirit with the hopelessness of its effort to conquer imperfection. Dishonesty and insincerity in worldly dealings